Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a Zor, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Erik Van Horn here today with Brian Holmes. Brian, as you know, or may not know, he's a good friend of mine. We started the Franchise Story podcast together. And boy, that was a while ago, Brian. Brian's a franchisee, does a lot in the franchising world with his company, Franchise Ramp. And we were talking the other day about why he's coming out of retirement. I'm like, dude, we need to get a show called Why Retirement Sucks. I think that would be fun and interesting. And you're just going to hear us talk as friends and catch up on stuff. So Brian, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, man. I've actually never been on the Franchise Secrets podcast before. So this is the first time. Very excited. What episode is this?
This is episode what, Caleb? 156.
Yeah. So it took 156 episodes for me to get on. So it's exciting. I'm stoked to be on.
You can tell I just don't let anybody on the podcast. So now you know, but you finally made it. I mean,
I know it's a big moment.
It is a big moment for both of us. But so we were talking why retirement sucks. Well, before we even get to that, it's been 156 episodes that people may not know who you are. So just talk about your friend, because this is a franchising podcast still. We're going to be talking about like getting out of your business, working out of your business. And like, once you're out of your business, what do you do? But you're a franchise guy. So why don't you give us a little bit of your story?
Sure. Yeah. So in 2006, I bought my first Liberty tax service over a 10-year period of time. I built that from 1 to 19 locations. My wife and I found out in 2016 that we were going to be having twin boys, late 2015, 2016. And just kind of realized that like it was time for us to make a little bit of a transition. We were going from 5 year-round employees to 200 employees in like a 3 to 4 week period of time. And, it was time for us to do something else. So I called Erik and I was like, hey, Erik, what's out there? What should I look at in franchising? From Liberty, we bought into Club Pilates very early in their kind of V2 Anthony Geisler exponential journey. I think there was 2 like version 2 studios at that point. Today there's 700 Club Pilates. We had some really good success when we first opened our first location. We opened 3 in 1 year, and in the process of transitioning out of Liberty Tax Service and selling that business. When I started that, I also decided like I had a lot of free time. So you go from 19 of anything to 1 in pre-sale of one thing and no other job. And twin, 6-month-old boys that don't do anything. So I had a lot of time on my hands. Started learning digital marketing. Ended up getting talked into starting a marketing agency. And now that our marketing agency, it's called Franchise Ramp. We work with 600 fitness and wellness franchise locations across the country. And that's what I do in franchising. Somewhere in the middle, we decided to start a Franchise Story podcast. So
yeah, we did. That was a fun time. That was
a good time.
Yeah. And so
it was the beginning of a lot of things.
It was. I mean, both of our lives have kind of gone different directions in franchising from that time. You moved from where your Club Pilates were in California. Now you live in Texas. So Sacramento to Austin. And then you also have other locations, right, in Austin of a different brand.
Yeah, we own 1 Yoga 6 location here in Austin that we opened in November. So
multi-unit, multi-brand, and that's not even your main thing. Like Franchise Ramp is a very helpful, successful business where you are a vendor. So I think one of the interesting things that we might want to hit on real quick is what was it like becoming a vendor to franchisors? because I think that would be a really cool thing to do. Until you're actually in it, it may not be as cool as it appears because the grass is always greener. But a lot of people out there, there's a lot of people that are in franchising. Maybe they are a franchisor or are a franchisee and they want to become a vendor. So what was that journey like for you? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, when you are a high performing franchisee or any sort of franchisee for a long period of time, you develop a perspective of what it's like to be, a part of the corporate team or be part of corporate, or what it is that they do and their responsibilities are. You also develop a perspective of what you think, vendors do and how that entire world works. Once you get into it, you find out it doesn't work. At least in my experience, it didn't work at all like I thought that it probably worked. Our role as a vendor in a franchise system is different than maybe initially thought it was going to be. And it was a very significant learning curve. And I have to say, we were pretty bad at it for a minute. It wasn't that we weren't good at what we were doing, the work of digital marketing, but we were definitely not good at navigating the franchisor vendor relationship. And that probably took us it took us all of 2019 and most of 2020 to figure out. So
there might be vendors or franchisors that are saying, what do you mean, Brian? Mm-hmm. And what does a good relationship with a franchisor and franchisee look like from a vendor's perspective?
Yeah. So I would say you have to try and solve both sets of problems, right? It's somewhat, maybe not as openly, talked about in franchising, that franchisors and franchisees have different goals, right? So franchisors' goals are primarily in a new concept or newer concept, or a concept that's not fully developed, is to open additional locations and generate more revenue, right? That's our primary initiative. And then on the franchisee side, it's going to be driving profitability, right? So getting those locations open, getting them to cash flow positive fast, and, potentially opening their next location is going to be their objectives. And there's some nuances to why those two things are different. And I think as a franchisee, you can end up thinking a lot of times that the franchisor has resources that they don't have. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, you can think all right, I'm paying, whatever your royalty number is. And in your head, you think that is a significant number, but you don't actually understand the cost structure of the franchisor and what money they actually have to allocate to the things that you think that you want or need as a franchisee. And those things are in a lot of cases may not be in alignment. And so and if you don't know and you don't understand their model and what it is that they're trying to accomplish, then it can be very easy for you as a franchisee to get frustrated.
I think this is a really interesting conversation because it may sound like Brian saying, hey, you guys don't understand as a franchisee what franchisors are actually doing. And in many cases, we don't understand unless you are a franchisor. Brian's not a franchisor. He's the middleman giving some real perspective on what he sees. This is good.
Yeah. And I may not say that they don't understand, because I don't know what everybody understands, right? But I know for me, in my journey, I think about all of the really long emails that I sent to, John Hewitt or Chris Bushy or the people in the Liberty team over the years. And I would be pretty embarrassed, I think, to read some of those today. I probably need to go back and look and see if I have them, because it would be kind of fun to go through and read some of those long emails and the perspective that I had as a franchisee. And then just the reality of us as a vendor, we really step into that relationship. And in some ways we kind of have to, it's not the word, we're the glue in the relationship, but we're definitely a big component piece in a relationship. And we have to help everyone accomplish their goals.
So let's talk about franchisor with different goals. I had Cameron Harold on speaking to the mastermind the other day, and he said one of the first things that he did when he was hired by his best friend, Brian Scudamore at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, was to make the corporate and franchisees profitable. And like, that was his number one. And he'd come from the franchisee side and been part of the franchisor, but that was his number one. Like, we've got to make these things where they are profitable. And that's one of the things that he sees as a way to grow a successful franchisor. So why is it different? Why are there franchisors? Why is it franchisor or franchisee different with profitability and revenue, or where may that align?
Well, I mean, the alignment is that you have to have revenue to have profitability, right? So, I mean, that's the absolute alignment. Like, we do have to grow our top line revenue as franchisees to have any shot at, achieving profitability. And I'm not saying that franchisors are not interested in franchisee profitability. I'm just saying that they can be a little bit different in how you look at it and how you attack like a problem. And another thing I think that is a nuance there is, when you're a franchisee, your perspective is when I was a franchisee, my perspective, or as a franchisee, my perspective is limited. I only know about my own locations, my own performance, and my own problems. The people that you're working at with corporate, they look at it from a much bigger perspective. They know, every franchisee's, challenges that are at least being presented to them in their role in their department. Because it's going to depend on what, when you're talking about vendors, it's going to depend on what the vendor is, right? Is it somebody that's providing, is it an architect? Like, that's a different problem set in a different department than, what we do as marketing, or what somebody does in sales, or so you really just kind of have to think about the nuance of it all. And really in my advice for anybody that is a franchisee or on the franchisor side, is just to ask questions and really try to understand what the other person's issue and their perspective is, and then see what you guys can do to come together to solve it. Instead of assume I understand what your goals are and what your perspective is, and then I can build my, argument in my head as to why that's not right.
That is a great way to kind of button up and cap off that conversation, because I had this conversation a lot with different people, and the more that you can seek to understand versus be understood, like truly do that, you're going to win. You're going to at least come out much further ahead, and you'll have perspective, and you'll probably have relationship with the franchisor that you didn't have before, and vice versa. Yeah. All right, shifting gears, franchise ramp. I remember early on when you guys were starting that, and you ended up making a very key hire, and you had some hires that didn't work out. So give us some of the nitty gritty of building a large company, and feel free to talk about how large that company actually is and kind of the journey of that. Cause I think that's really interesting. You're a vendor, but everyone goes through growth and growing pains and maybe wanting to quit at different times. So take us on that journey.
Yeah. So for Franchise Ramp, really, it was like a mission driven, or is a mission driven business. I tell people, like, there's some franchisees that come in and they do really well out of the gate and they're successful and they make money. I was not really like that franchisee. I came in, I struggled. I wasn't a great franchisee. I had to learn the hard way, a lot of lessons. At Franchise Ramp, our mission is to help franchisees achieve their entrepreneurial dreams, because we think that's where everybody comes to franchising from, right? Like, everybody has a different path to it, but I think that in general, everybody has a dream. That was really important to me. That's why we started the Franchise Story podcast, right? Is because we really just wanted to give back, we wanted to help people. If it wasn't for that mission, Franchise Ramp wouldn't exist today. Like, financially, I didn't need to do it. It's still not even close to where I make most of my money. And so it was really, how can we help and serve franchisees better and help them, get to cash flow positive or profitability quicker. And I think that mission really resonated. And it took us a couple of years to get, really any sort of traction in it. In 2019, I joined a mastermind with you and had the opportunity to meet one of both of our friends, Aaron Johnstone, and convinced him that joining Franchise Ramp would be, good for him and a great part of his journey. And it absolutely has. And we went from essentially having like 60 or 70 locations to 400 locations, almost 400 locations in a 4-month period of time. And that almost ruined the entire company. You can grow too fast. We grew too fast, and then COVID hit at the same time. So 2020 was just a really wild ride for us as an organization. COVID is probably the best thing that could have possibly happened to us as an organization, because we probably would have done unrepairable damage in 2020 if we hadn't had to step back from 357, I think is the number, locations back to less than 200, and really like refine our team and refine our processes. Franchise Ramp's 100% built on the entrepreneur operating system. So most people are going to be familiar with the book Traction. When we had 3 employees, 4 employees, we actually started the process. We hired an implementer, and we run Franchise Ramp 100% according to EOS. And that's really been helpful for us to solve problems. When you talk about good hires and bad hires, we had this conversation yesterday. So yesterday we just had our quarterly for Franchise Ramp with the leadership team. And we really talked about one of the things that differentiates us is like, our controller actually said this. She says, I've never worked for a company that has a higher standard for employees, like in the sense of who we will onboard and the process we take them through to decide if we're actually going to bring them on the team. And I thought that was fun. I took some pride. I definitely took some pride in this statement, because that, it's kind of ridiculous what we actually do from a hiring perspective. But in 2020, when we were scaling, we didn't have that figured out. We really didn't have our core values 100% dialed in. We didn't understand what it takes to hire people according to your core values, what process needs to happen to get the right people in the right seat. And we probably added 6 to 8 employees that maybe were good tactically, like they could actually do the work that we needed to be done, but were not good cultural fits for the organization. And it took us a while to work through those, 6 to 8 individuals, and then bring in people who were true core values fits. And that's been huge for the organization. If you have the right people in the right seat in every seat on the bus, that's a completely different organization than one where half the people are.
We just had a guest, Casey, on. He was business partners with Mark Winters, who wrote the book Rocket Fuel. He was integrator for Mark. And then we had Cameron on, Cameron Harold, on that mastermind session, talking about much of the same thing. He comes at it from, he's a big fan of Traction, the EOS model. He thinks it breaks at a certain point when you get too big. And then there's a different type of way to implement the same type of structure. Mm-hmm. But the point of all that is, Casey, Cameron, you, people that are doing it this way, talk about core values, talk about mission, and to people that haven't really done that, it may sound fluffy. It may sound like this is, the culture word they may have had a bad experience with culture. When did you come up with your missions and your values, and walk us through that part of the journey?
Yeah. So the way we actually attacked this is we knew we wanted to build and scale, a significant business. So we knew that. So when we went into the process, when we had, only a handful of employees and a handful of accounts, we started the process of instituting EOS. And that was key for us. Now, as far as to the point when we actually we hired an implementer. I tried to self-implement Traction in my Liberty business in probably 2010. So I'd taken a shot at it by myself. But one of the things that made our business, or makes Franchise Ramp different than maybe a lot of businesses that are all the businesses I've had in the past or have otherwise, is there were 2 primary entrepreneurs, right? So it wasn't just me. It was also, my partner, Peter Hansen, and then my other partner, Aaron. So there was 3 of us that come in, which I think partnerships, if you don't have things really dialed in, can go really poorly. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a very strong foundation of how we were going to run the business, what everybody's roles were. And as a group, we went through and we determined, what our core values were going to be. And I think a big piece is they're not aspirational. It's just like who we are as an organization. And I think that's really big.
Yep. I like that. Can you tell us, so 3 partners, there's Aaron, there is Pete, and yourself, and all 3 of you have different skill sets. Pete, just so everyone knows, Pete is a franchisee with Club Pilates. He was with Liberty Tax, just a beast with businesses, and just a great guy. Aaron, a younger kid that
24
spent a ton of money, other people's money running.
Yeah, he'd spent like 50
million running ads. So you get the reps, and he learned a lot. So that's the team, the dream team. What are each of you good at? Like, if you had to say the 3 things that you're the best at, Peter's the best at, and Aaron's the best at, what would those 3 things be for each of you?
Yeah. So for me, it's like in that, visionary integrator paradigm, like I'm off the charts visionary. And I would struggle very much as an integrator. Aaron was product, right? Like that's really what he was bringing to the table. And he's amazing. Like he's just an amazing leader. Like he's really great with people. He cares at a level that I think is unparalleled to almost any person I've ever met, about the clients that he works with and the work that he does for them. And I think that's a really huge and a very unique aspect to him. You don't necessarily run into a ton of people who are incredibly good and incredibly caring at the same time. And that's unique. And then Pete is, the roles that he kind of jumped in the organization is like he took the integrator role. And it's a little bit of a forced role for him. Like, I think at one point we woke up and realized that we have 2 visionaries trying to run one company and no integrator. Things had gotten a little bit out of control at the end of 2020. And so that's the paradigm, and that's what works. But the thing is his attention to detail, Pete's attention to detail is amazing. And he can just really made sure the wheels didn't come off the bus as we were growing.
You mentioned Aaron, one of his greatest strengths is caring, like he has the competency, but he also really genuinely cares. And in that conversation with Cameron that we had yesterday, that was one of the things Cameron talked about. And we dove into it a little bit deeper, but that actually genuinely caring about people and not just what they do at work, but about them as a human being. He's like, that's key. And so this hearing, it's interesting hearing these conversations from these amazing people like Cameron and others, hearing you talk like you're doing it, Brian.
Yeah. And it's even more important, right? Like in our space, we are a B2B company, but on the other side of the B for us is somebody's life savings. Mm-hmm. And so that's not like we're trying to sell, to Dell or some other Fortune 500 company, right? Like we are really, it's important to care. And, for me and Pete, it's easy to be mission driven. Like we live this life, right? Like this is actually how we make our living, is through franchising. And we've built and scaled, both multiple franchises. But for Aaron, it was all new, right? It probably took him a year to really understand like franchising and kind of the nuance to how the relationships kind of work. But he immediately like grabbed onto that because he's been an entrepreneur since he was a senior in high school. He bought his first business when he was a senior in high school. It was an e-com business. And so, I mean, it's just in him as a person.
Let's shift gears again. I want to talk about the turnover and your employees, because there was a time when you were going one direction, hiring a certain type of person, and then you realize that's probably not the type of employee base that you want to have. And there were some changes in how you did things, but it also resulted in some turnover. So what are some lessons in that?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, we felt like we just needed people who knew how to do the job. And so we were hiring for experience. And if you just hire a bunch of different people that can do the job, you're not really going to have a culture. If you hire for the culture and then make sure that the people can do the job, then you'll have a very cohesive organization. Like our company, like in Good to Great, one of the best kind of paradigms of that book is that a great company isn't a great place for everyone to work. You have to be a very unique individual to want to work at Franchise Ramp and to like the way that we do things. We're a fully remote company. We have ridiculously high standards for everybody. We have an entire team of type A people that push really, really hard. And so if you get into this organization and you aren't type A, you aren't really driven, like you're not going to be a fit for the company. You're going to know it. Everybody else is going to know it. And it's just going to be a matter of time before, you're going to want to quit, more likely than anything.
I want to go down the rabbit hole of hiring, but I want you to commit right now in front of me that you'll do a separate podcast on hiring, and you can choose to bring one person with you, and we can do a podcast with just you or you and one other person from
Okay. Yeah, I know it'd be really good. Cause I do think we have a very dialed in hiring process. I wouldn't be the person because I haven't done a single interview. Right. So I understand how the process works. I understand what the process is, but I don't participate in the process.
And I know that. And I think that's why I gave you the out to have somebody else on, but I do think it's very important because you are hands off in that and how that relationship works and the trust that you have with the people that hire. So that's why I think it would be fun to do it with 3. So Caleb will get that set up. Don't worry about it. We'll get that going. But I really do as I'm asking you questions and I always have the audience in my mind, like, what do they want to hear? Yeah. And it's hiring. And I hear that often from people. So that'll be a fun one.
And just to tease on that a little bit of why it would probably be a valuable podcast is when I was talking to the team yesterday, when we were discussing hiring process and digging into it, like we do a panel interview. And so in that panel interview, like it could be a new account manager or new franchisee success manager on it. And they just end up being like the cheerleader for how awesome of a company it is to work for, because they just went through this ridiculous hiring process and then found out what is reality of working for the organization. And so it does all circle back to actually work. When I was earlier in my career, I thought a lot of this was BS, but it's not. It works. You got to commit to it, though. You just can't do it a little bit. They can't be the core values that live, in your head or written down somewhere.
When we're just in private conversations, you're talking about your core values. You guys live and breathe that. Now, I'm sure you've probably had, out of the, thousands of customers that you've had since Franchise Ramp, came to be what it is today, not every one of them is a raving fan.
Oh, absolutely. We had 740, I think.
740. Okay. So almost 1,000, over 500 different customers. And the question comes from some comments that I see in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group or just in Facebook or just anywhere. When you have a business and let's say you're just on Facebook and you say, I had a bad experience with this company, like that lives on forever on social. And you're saying something, you're saying something negative about another person's business because you probably had a negative experience, and you're vocalizing it in probably an aggressive way. That I see that out there. I see it happen in the Facebook group. I see it happen just in general. Now, if you were to put the mirror up, if you were to look in your own business and realize you probably have some customers that are not very happy with your business, like, would you want people out there saying the same thing, or how do you have a constructive conversation around that? So I want to know how you deal with customers that may not have had the best experience. Maybe you win them back, or maybe you let them go, but just talk about that, because all of us business owners know that will happen.
Yeah. We have franchisees that come and go, work with us and then don't work with us and work with us. Right. And like one of the things, because we are 100% franchisee focused is like, we don't have contracts, right? So we're month to month contracts. If somebody wants to leave, they can leave. If they want to come back, they can come back. And like, we want to treat them amazingly through the whole process. There's absolutely times where we fail to deliver for our franchisees in some way. It's like, I tell people the marketing business isn't actually just running the ads. It's so much more. It's the relationship that you have with the franchisee, the actual work that you do for them, and then the relationship that you have with the franchisor are really big component pieces. Plus, you have the mess of things like billing and administration, right? Like those are a huge part of a business that does $1 million in revenue a month. So it's like there's a lot there that needs to be handled. As far as franchisees talking poorly about us, obviously it's going to happen. That is part of the process. Our retention rate at Franchise Ramp is really, really high. So we don't have a ton of that out there, and we have a very big drive to serve. One of the reasons that we have grown so much is that we have one part-time, somewhat full-time salesperson in the organization. Almost all of our business comes from referrals. Like 99% of our business comes from referrals. We have zero outbound marketing efforts. And I think that's a testament to what we do. As far as like how to think about it, that's tough. Like you want to get those people on the phone, you want to have a conversation with them, but in some ways they're not just expressing what happened, they're also expressing how they feel and their frustration. And being a new franchisee can be very frustrating. If you've never run businesses before, if you've never been down this path before, then a lot of things are going to seem like huge obstacles. And they're also going to seem like you're not going to understand really what's going on. Like I got an email that I really appreciated from a client that was leaving, and it was probably 400 words. So she put a lot of time and effort into writing the email. It didn't have a single question mark. Like it was all the assumption of what she thought was true and was explaining it, all to me, which I get it. That's how my emails used to look to John Hewitt. There was no question marks. But now, I would just seek to understand, and I want to understand their perspective and, talk to them about it. So I don't think am I trying to not answer the question directly?
No, I think this is great. I was really thinking like there's such gold in what you're saying. So just people like go back and listen to that, especially as a franchisee that has not been through a full cycle. If you haven't gone from the glee stage to the we stage, if you're somewhere in the middle, go back and listen to the last 5 minutes and what Brian was saying, because he's talking about a relationship with the franchisor, but also perspective as a franchisee that you just don't have until you've been full cycle. So I think that was great perspective. And I know, I hear you talk and I'm like, I know conversations that we've had in the past of how you got to have that perspective. So
and a lot of times I was on the other side of the deal. Like I was just wrong. Right. Like in retrospect of looking about how I thought of something, what I thought about it, if I wanted to go back and start over in my franchise journey or in any business, right? Because we are in real estate now, we buy houses. Like it's all about asking questions instead of coming to something thinking the answer. And I've been really lucky in my franchise journey to have lots of high performing franchisees as friends and them give me all kinds of advice and not listen to any of it. And that was, that's it. I should have asked better questions because I just didn't understand what they were trying to tell me. So
actually doing a training in the masterminds on how to ask good questions. And because there's, that's a skill. And it takes practice. And, doing the story podcast and doing the secrets podcast, you get better at asking questions. So that's definitely a skill set to have. So, all right. The name of the podcast was Why Retirement Sucks. We haven't even talked about it, but it's all the build up to this because you've built something that I think is special and it's not just a, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, the success that people see now that you've achieved from financial to time, there's everything that you've heard Brian talk about is everything that it took to get to this point. So let's fast forward to the point where you were like, hey, Erik, I've been at the lake a lot. I'm enjoying the family a ton, doing the things that I want to do. Like what was the time of really pulling yourself out of the business to having a bunch of free time? And then what happened?
Yeah. So last March-ish, I essentially decided to I don't know, I guess I would call it pseudo retire, semi-retire, or fully retire. Basically, I didn't go to work. However you want to frame what I was doing is I stepped down as the CEO for Franchise Ramp. Our Pilates business, our fitness business, Adrienne, my wife, is very involved in, but she loves it, doesn't need any help running that business. Started buying houses, but that also, I've got a great partner in that business, and it's probably an hour of my day max, even now. And so I had the ability to not work. And I was actually when I started in franchising, I had a goal of making 7 figures from franchising. And in 2020, I woke up and realized I had achieved that goal. And so I was like, I've already accomplished my goal. I don't have a bigger goal. I don't need more money. I've got the cars, the house, the toys, the family, all the things, right, that you think that maybe that you want. Like, I'm not a huge traveler, don't have any desire to, go super hard in that way. And so I kind of just reached that point. And so it's like, well, what am I working for? And so maybe I'll go pursue these other things that I think that I would like. Like, I'm a huge car person. So I spent a lot of time. I've got a house with shop, working in a shop, boating, whatever I wanted to do. And yeah, so I did that for almost 9 months.
What was it like?
Horrible. Awful.
When did it become horrible? Like, when did you?
It was instantly horrible. I instantly knew that I wasn't doing the right thing. That I didn't actually enjoy it. I instead of feeling like, I didn't enjoy it. I wasn't having fun. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel like I was growing as a person. I was just like kind of hiding in a shell. I wasn't talking to people outside of my, my immediate network. Was just trying to do what I thought.
Name one thing that you missed. What did you miss? And we're talking about Franchise Ramp, coming out of Franchise Ramp. What's the one thing that you missed?
Well, it wasn't just Franchise Ramp. Like, I just had completely stepped back from work in general.
Well, you were separated from a lot of that other stuff to begin with. I think Franchise Ramp was the main thing that you were able to.
Yeah, that was busy. Like, that was a chaotic, couple of years to like get it to that point. And
what did you miss?
Quite a bit. The challenge. I missed the challenge of trying to move the ball down the field. So my favorite parts of business are the like 0 to 1. It's like, I've got an idea. Everybody would look at you and be like, you have no idea how you're going to make that work. And then I want to outline a path and a plan to make it a reality and get it going. Like, this is my favorite part of business. Like, I would probably just do that over and over and over again if you didn't actually have to run the businesses when they existed.
So how do you take the thing that you enjoy and go back and help the current company that's already past that point?
Yeah, well, there's levels in the game, right? So, if you have 600 locations, that seems big if you have 100 or 200 locations, but there's locations, there's other agencies that are, pushing 2,000, locations. So we're relatively small. Ultimately, the reason that I came back was because I was missing the challenge. And there is a different set of challenges that you have to navigate through to get us from 600 to 2,400, which is our goal. And I, as a person, have to be better. I have to become a better, CEO, a better visionary, a better leader, and really push myself out of my comfort zone as a person to get us on the right path to do that. Now, we're kind of already on the right path. I mean, since 2018, we've grown by almost 7,000%. So in those, 3 years, so we're on a really good path, but what got us here won't get us there type deal.
Would you have been able to stay in the business, have the same realization and come back and be effective as you are today in the business without having an 9-month retirement?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think I would have still thought I wanted to do the other things. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't have thought that like, hey, this is actually the highest, best use and the happiest. I think a lot of people, or at least I thought that I was supposed to want something else, that I was supposed to want to go. I don't golf, but that's an easy example, like go golfing every day or go wake surfing every day or go and do all these other, things. And when it turns out like my favorite thing in the world is building businesses, I would do it for free. The first 3 years of Franchise Ramp, I did do it for free. So it's like, so it's what I love. I really like to work. Now I'm not a 60 to 80 hour work week type of guy. Like I have a really cool life. Like I can pretty much work 24 hours a week. Like I take my boys to school in the morning, every morning. I go to the gym. And then when they get off the bus at 3:30 or 3:17, like I'm out there, like we're at, that's my work week. And I'll probably take 1 day a week off. So, to do maybe go wake surfing. So you got to come down.
Especially when I come down, we'll go wake surfing.
I'll take the whole week off.
But you have the flexibility to do that. What are you doing to level up? You mentioned leadership and different things. What are you doing actively to level that up?
To me, it's really about my network. That, when I go back and look over time, what has been the catalyst for every big change in my life? It's new people. It's new like influences and increased perspective. So, someone asked me like, well, why do you live in, or why did you choose to move to Austin? Austin has an amazing entrepreneurial scene. There are so many rock star entrepreneurs here that are trying to build and scale their businesses. And being in that community has been a huge eye opener for me. I had the opportunity, I'm in an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization. Everybody should look at it as something to potentially join in the concept of like cost. It's not really expensive for what it can provide you access to. And I had the opportunity through that to join a program. It's called Entrepreneurial Masters Program, and it's at MIT. So for 3 years, I'm going to go to MIT with a group of 70 other entrepreneurs. And on average, the businesses increased by 300% during that time period. So it's just, that's what I think we can do as an organization. And I think it's going to put me in the room with, and very uncomfortable. Like I'm not a good student, was never a good student, didn't enjoy that atmosphere. Definitely don't want to talk in front of people. That's why like I don't do podcasts anymore. I was thinking about it today. Like if I could somehow figure out how to get out of this today, I would. But I think that's it. It's just like really getting in the right groups, learning from the right people, getting exposed to the people who have done what you want to do.
Well, when you have good friends like this, they don't let you get out of things like this.
Yeah, I know.
Especially when like I know the value that you're able to bring to so many other people. So man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for not canceling on me. Caleb's probably already on our second podcast. We can delay it a little bit, but that'll be a real fun one. How would you sum up this conversation? If you had to sum up this conversation, how would you do it?
I would say it's just, be honest with yourself about what you like in business and figure out how to do those things.
Well said. Thanks again, buddy.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.